I should say he's doing very well. He's a very strong person, and he knows he has to be there for the time being, and he knows it's a grand injustice, and it will end someday. So with that knowledge, he is trying to make best of it. He is trying to spend the time as wisely and as well as he can. He is on the most basic level. He is trying to take very good care of himself. Trying to eat well, sleep well, move as much as he can in that very, very small courtyard they have. But also he's reading as much as he can, and I'm trying to send him books that are interesting. There is a limit on the number of books he can have in his room, but he's reading fast, and he's sending them to the library, prison library, once he's done with them. And he's writing. And actually what he kept him so strong and so lively and so optimistic in this past 2.5 years has been his own writing. He wrote this book, the collection of essays, which is coming out in many languages now. And then on top of that, he wrote a novella that's set in contemporary Istanbul, political but also very kind of a personal novella. And he's very happy with his writing and the reception he's getting from the world. So that keeps him going. First of all, he is a writer. He lives to write. That's how he defines himself. And of course, for any writer, your readers, your audience is the people in your world, in your life. That's the people you depend on. So the bigger that audience is, the more international it is, the more diverse it is. I think it's very important to him. And he did want these essays to come out in other languages before Turkish for several reasons. First of all, in Turkey now, his own publisher is a bit careful, let's say, and he doesn't want to put his own publisher at risk by publishing his books. After all, he's someone who has a life without parole verdict over his head. And he wanted to reach out to the world. He wants to be an international writer anyway. He doesn't define himself as Turkish, as local, as national. He's an anti-nationalist. So he wants the world to know his situation, but also more than his situation, he wants the world, everyone, to know that even in the most difficult situations, your power as a human being is is your inner strength, your imagination. If you can imagine things, if you can create things in your own mind, you can pretty much cope with everything. And of course, that is a writer's gift more than anything. And he is, I think, happy to share his gift with people. I always wanted him to write because I knew that would keep him busy and his mind going. And he had this idea for a novella, and also he has this Ottoman quartet of 4 historical novels, the 4th of which he was working on before he was imprisoned. So he wanted to continue that, but of course there's a lot of research that's involved with it, and it's set in 1915, so he was going into that, but it wasn't easy in this small cell to do this, to have the books, to have the resources he needed. So he was waiting. But then the Society of Authors in the UK asked me if he could write an essay for their magazine, the author. And he said, okay. So he wrote this essay, which is called The Writer's Paradox, which is now in the book. A very strong essay, again, about the power of imagination. And it was great. And I translated that into English for Society of Authors. And it came out. And there was such a good reaction to it. And it was a good essay. And I said, look, why don't you write more essays like this? Write about your life, write about the stories you listen, whatever, whatever is in your imagination, just write essays, because, writing a novel didn't seem possible at the time. And he thought of it, and he started writing these essays, and I started translating them one by one. And then after 2-3 essays, we had this conversation, and I suggested, this was all on the phone, only 10 minutes, because we couldn't see each other at the time at all. And I suggested maybe this will become a book of essays, and he liked the idea. And then at some point he started working toward a book, thinking of the inner balances of the book, a longer essay, a shorter essay, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. But really, he did it over 7 or 8 months. It's 19 essays that he decided that would go into the book. And of course, it was under state of emergency still. So he had very limited access to his lawyers, only 1 hour a week on a certain day at a certain time, and no access to me. Only he could see his children and blood relatives. And only 10 minutes on the phone with me every 2 weeks. That was the limitation. And he couldn't get anything out except for his defense statements. So what he did was he would give his notes for his defense statements to the lawyers, and the lawyers would bring those to me, and in between those notes there would be an essay, handwritten essay. He put out these essays one by one, and I would type them out and translate them into English immediately. We didn't have a book contract or anything, but I wanted them to exist in English for everyone to read, because not many people in the world read Turkish. So yeah, that's how it began.